They're deleting screenshots right now. While you're hearing this, someone who spent months collecting evidence against you just watched a 60-second video where someone defended you publicly, and now they're in their camera roll, sweating, frantically selecting delete, 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 watching those little circles spin as years of jealousy and planned destruction vanish into digital nothingness. That's not paranoia. That's happening right now. Because someone stood up for you where it mattered, where the light hits hardest, and suddenly everyone who whispered your name in dark corners realized they're the ones standing in shadow. You felt it, didn't you? That shift in atmospheric pressure, that sudden silence in group chats that used to buzz with your name, the way certain people stopped making eye contact, not from shame exactly, but from something colder, calculation. They're measuring distances now, figuring out how to rewrite their own histories before someone asks them to explain the receipts they swore they had. But here's what's eating them alive from the inside out, what's making their hands shake as they scroll through old messages looking for anything incriminating with their own fingerprints on it. They realize now that they were never fighting you. They were fighting a ghost version of you they created in meetings you weren't invited to, in conversations that happened behind doors they thought were soundproof. Someone broke that soundproofing. On camera, where it's permanent, where algorithms amplify truth faster than lies can run. And now they're discovering that the person they spent so much energy trying to bury is not only standing, but casting a shadow so long it's reaching back to them, touching their careers, their reputations, their carefully curated personas that are suddenly looking a lot more curated and a lot less careful. You want to know what real power looks like? It's not throwing punches. It's standing still while someone else throws punches. FORU. While you're not even in the room. While you're living your life completely unaware that Vindication is being filmed in real time and uploaded where millions can witness it. That's the difference between you and them. You moved forward. They stayed behind, collecting evidence like dragons hoarding gold, thinking they were building an arsenal when they were really just building their own cages. Evidence of what? Of their obsession. Of how much free real estate you occupied in minds that should have been focused on literally anything else productive. Think about the psychology of someone who screenshots conversations from 8 months ago, who saves receipts from arguments that everyone else forgot about by Tuesday, who catalogs slights and disagreements like they're building a case for a jury that doesn't exist. That's not strategy. That's sickness. That's someone whose entire sense of purpose got wrapped up in proving you wrong, proving you're bad, proving you're the villain in a story they're directing in their heads where they're the righteous protagonist. But protagonists don't panic, delete evidence. Villains do, when the light comes. Someone turned the light on. Someone you maybe don't even know that well. Someone who just saw through the smoke and said the quiet part out loud where it couldn't be ignored or deleted or spun into something else. They said what needed saying. They defended what needed defending. And the dominoes started falling in directions your enemies didn't anticipate. Your enemies. Let's talk about them properly. Not the obvious ones. Not the people who were openly hostile. Those were never your real problem. They were too loud, too visible, too easy to identify and dismiss. No, your real enemies were the subtle ones. The ones who smiled in your face while compiling folders with your name on them. The ones who said, "I'm worried about them," while secretly hoping you'd crash so they could be there with cameras ready to document the wreckage. These are the people refreshing social media right now. Watching that video where someone defended you. Watching the comments section fill up with people saying, "Finally someone said it." And I always thought something was off about the narrative. And feeling their carefully constructed reality start to crack like ice in spring. They're trying to remember what they said, where they said it, who might have screenshots of them. The hunters are realizing they're the hunted. The documentarians are discovering they're the subjects. The narrators are finding out their characters in a story they don't control. And you didn't even have to do anything. That's what's driving them insane. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't fight back. You didn't play their game. You just existed, continued existing, kept breathing and moving and building while they exhausted themselves, building cases and collecting evidence and spinning narratives. Someone else saw that. Someone with a platform, with a voice that carries, with credibility they couldn't immediately attack without exposing themselves. And that someone said what they saw, plainly, publicly, permanently. Now watch what happens next. This is where it gets beautiful in that dark, poetic way that feels like justice finally showing up late to the party but making an entrance nobody forgets. First, the mass deletion. Panicked, sloppy, desperate. They're going through DMs like they're destroying evidence before the feds arrive. Old tweets getting bulk deleted. Instagram stories they thought disappeared 18 months ago, getting manually removed from archives. Comments they left on posts about you getting quietly edited or removed entirely. But here's the problem with digital evidence in the modern age. It's never really gone. Someone else screenshotted it. Someone else saved it. Someone else saw it and remembered it. And more importantly, the way they're deleting it, the panic and sloppiness of it, that's creating new evidence. People notice mass deletions. Algorithms notice pattern changes. Mutual connections notice when someone's entire online presence suddenly shifts tone overnight. They're making it worse. Every frantic delete is a confession. Every edited comment is an admission. Every rewritten caption is them telling on themselves in real time. Second, the backpedaling. Watch for it. Watch how people who were absolutely certain of your guilt, who spoke with authority about your character flaws, who positioned themselves as moral authorities on your situation, watch how they suddenly develop amnesia. I never said that. You're misremembering. That was taken out of context. I was just asking questions. No, they were making statements, declarations, judgments. They were building guillotines in town squares, and now they're claiming they were just carpenters who didn't know what the structure was for. But someone stood up for you on camera, and now everyone has to reconcile their private certainties with public defense, and that reconciliation is ripping apart carefully maintained images. Good people don't usually need to panic delete evidence. Innocent people don't usually scramble to rewrite histories. Honest people don't usually develop selective amnesia about things they said with their whole chest 6 months ago. Third, the redirections. They'll try to make it about something else, anything else. They'll suddenly become very interested in nuance, in complexity, in both sides, in everyone makes mistakes, in let's just move forward. These are the same people who offered you no nuance when they were sharpening knives, who saw no complexity when they were drawing conclusions, who acknowledged no both sides when they were choosing theirs, who offered no let's move forward when they were dragging you backward through every past mistake they could excavate. But now they want peace. Now they want healing. Now they want to forget and forgive. And why can't we all just get along? Because someone stood up for you on camera, and forgetting isn't an option anymore when the record is public and permanent and shared and saved and commented on by thousands who weren't in the original conspiracy, but can recognize a pattern when they see one. This is the part where you have a choice. You could be gracious, you could be forgiving, you could take the high road and let them slink away into whatever shadows they crawled out of, grateful that someone saved your reputation without you having to dirty your hands with defense. Or you could watch. You could simply bear witness to what happens when people who built platforms on your downfall watch those platforms collapse under the weight of their own lies. You could observe, with that cold clarity that comes from surviving what was meant to destroy you, as they scramble and panic and realize that the person they were so certain would disappear is still here, still standing, still mattering enough that someone with a voice defended them publicly. You don't have to do anything. That's the power move they never saw coming. Your silence now is louder than their accusations ever were. Your continued existence is more threatening than any revenge you could plot. Your success, your peace, your forward momentum, all of it is a living refutation of every narrative they tried to write with you as the villain. Someone stood up for you. That means you matter. That means your truth has weight. That means the lies were transparent enough that someone who wasn't even in the trenches looked at the situation and said, "No, this isn't right." That someone risked their own credibility to defend yours. Think about that. They put their name, their platform, their audience's trust on the line to say what they saw. That's not something people do for narratives that ring true. That's what people do when they see injustice so clear that silence becomes complicity. Your enemies are learning this in real time. They're discovering that the mob they thought they controlled, the narrative they thought they owned, was always just a house of cards waiting for one person to point out that houses don't balance on cards. Now the whole structure is falling, and they're buried underneath it, and every frantic attempt to dig themselves out just makes the pile heavier. Meanwhile, you're above it all. Not because you climbed there, because you never descended to their level in the first place. You stayed ground floor, kept working, kept living, kept being who you are while they built underground networks of gossip and speculation and character assassination. They went low, deep underground, and now that someone's shining light down there, all anyone can see is how far they fell trying to bury you. The panic deleting isn't just about covering tracks. It's about cognitive dissonance. It's about the painful realization that maybe, possibly, they were wrong. About you, about the situation, about their own judgment. And if they were wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? What else have they been so certain about that crumbles under the lightest scrutiny? That's the existential crisis happening in real time. That's why the deleting is panicked, because it's not just evidence they're erasing, it's versions of themselves they're trying to disappear. The version who was so sure, the version who spoke so confidently, the version who judged so harshly, they're trying to kill that version before anyone else sees it clearly. Too late. Someone stood up for you on camera. That video is circulating. People are connecting dots, asking questions, looking back at old situations with new suspicion, wondering what else they were lied to about, wondering who else was wrongly accused, wondering how many other narratives were built on foundations of gossip and hearsay and coordinated character assassination. You're the catalyst for something bigger than your own vindication. You're the crack in the dam. Other people who were silenced, other situations that were misrepresented, other truths that were buried. They're all surfacing now because someone decided your truth mattered enough to defend publicly. That's legacy. That's impact. That's the kind of thing that outlives the drama and the gossip and the temporary social media cycles. Someone will remember that video in 5 years when your name comes up, and they'll remember that someone significant enough vouched for you when it wasn't popular or easy or safe to do so. Your enemies will remember it too, every time they see your name, every time you succeed, every time you're publicly acknowledged or celebrated or respected. They'll remember the day they had to panic delete evidence because someone stood up for you and destroyed months of their careful construction in 60 seconds of truth. That memory will haunt them. Not because you're haunting them, because they haunted themselves. They invested so much time, so much energy, so much of their identity into being right about you being wrong. And when someone publicly demonstrated they were wrong about you being wrong, they lost more than an argument. They lost the narrative that gave their obsession purpose. Now they're just people who spent months collecting screenshots about someone who's doing fine. Someone who's still here, someone who someone else defended publicly, someone who clearly matters more than they wanted to admit. What do you do with that kind of power? The power of simply existing while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own lies? The power of silence while their panic speaks volumes? The power of moving forward while they're stuck deleting backwards? You do exactly what you've been doing. You keep going. You keep building. You keep existing so fully and authentically that any narrative constructed around you looks obviously false just by comparison. You keep mattering. You keep being worth defending. You keep being the kind of person that someone with integrity looks at and thinks, no, that's not right. I need to speak up. Because here's the final truth, the one that's really eating them alive right now as they frantically scroll through old files and messages and posts. They went to war with someone who wasn't even fighting. They built weapons against someone who was building a life. They collected evidence against someone who was collecting experiences, growth, genuine connections, real success. They were playing a game you never entered. And somehow, you won anyway. No, not somehow. Because someone saw. Someone with eyes clear enough and voice loud enough decided that truth mattered more than whatever social capital they might lose by speaking it. That's validation they can never touch, never diminish, never rewrite. On camera, public, permanent. Algorithmic reach beyond anything their whisper networks could ever achieve. Your defense went viral while their accusations stayed in group chats and disappeared DMs. Now they're learning what irreversible looks like. What permanent means in the digital age. What happens when you spend so much time building cases that you forget the truth has its own defense mechanisms. And sometimes, those mechanisms look like brave people with platforms saying, no, you're wrong, where millions can hear it. Let them delete. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them rewrite and revise and desperately try to memory hold their own judgments. Every action they take now is just confirmation of what that person said when they stood up for you. If they were right about you, they'd stand firm. They'd double down. They'd present their evidence proudly. Instead, they're deleting it, hiding it, pretending it never existed, rewriting their own histories because someone made them look at your truth. And your truth made their lies impossible to maintain. You didn't have to prove anything. Someone else saw what needed seeing and said what needed saying. That's how truth works in the end. It doesn't require your defense. It just requires one person honest enough to speak it where it counts. Everything else? Everything they did, everything they said, everything they collected and compiled and planned, it's all collapsing inward like a dying star, dense with its own gravity, consuming itself, becoming a black hole that pulls in nothing but their own reputations. And you? You're out here in the light, in the open, defended publicly by someone who risks something real to tell your truth. That's not just vindication, that's elevation. That's transformation from victim of whispers to recipient of public defense. That's your story changing in real time from they said about you to someone stood up for you. Let that sink in while they're panic deleting. Let that reality settle while they're scrambling. Let that truth crystallize while they're melting down. Someone stood up for you. On camera. Where it matters. Where it lasts. Where their lies can't reach anymore because the truth got there first. Louder, clearer, backed by credibility. They can't attack without exposing themselves further. You won without fighting. You were defended without asking. You were vindicated without having to prove anything. That's not luck. That's what happens when you live honestly enough that truth defends itself through people who recognize it. So what now? What do you do with this strange power of being publicly defended while your accusers privately panic? Nothing. Everything. Whatever you want. Because the narrative isn't about you surviving their attacks anymore. It's about them surviving the exposure of their attacks. The story shifted. The power dynamic inverted. The hunters became the hunted, and all you had to do was keep being you. That's the lesson they're learning too late, in the worst way, publicly and permanently. You don't defeat people like you by collecting evidence and building cases and coordinating whisper campaigns. You can't. Because people like you don't need defending by you. The truth defends itself. Reality defends itself. Time defends itself. Someone just accelerated that process, spoke up when it mattered, defended what deserved defending. And now, everyone who bet against you is learning what it feels like when the house always wins and they're not the house. They're the ones being played out, statistically eliminated, removed from the table. Not by you, by the simple mathematical certainty that truth, given enough time and enough light, always outlasts lies. Someone just provided the light, on camera, permanently. Let them panic, let them delete, let them scramble. That's not your concern anymore. Your concern is what it's always been, moving forward, building upward, existing fully, being worth defending. You're good at that. So good that someone noticed. So good that someone spoke up. So good that your enemies are now your own worst enemies, because every move they make trying to bury you just exposes them further. That's poetry. Dark, poetic, perfect justice. And you didn't even have to write it. Someone else saw the story clearly enough to tell it where it mattered. All you had to do was be worth telling the truth about. So here's what you do with this moment, this weird inflection point where vindication happens publicly while your accusers crumble privately. You remember it, not for revenge, for perspective. For the next time someone tries to build a case against you, collect evidence about you, write narratives around you, you'll remember that truth has its own timeline, its own defense mechanisms, its own champions who speak up when the lies get too loud. And you'll keep going, keep building, keep being so undeniably yourself that any narrative constructed around you looks like obvious fiction just by proximity to your reality. Keep mattering enough that people with platforms, with voices, with credibility feel compelled to defend you when you're being attacked. That's not something you can fake or force or manufacture. That's earned through consistency, through authenticity. Through being exactly who you are even when people are collecting screenshots trying to prove you're something else. Someone stood up for you. That means you stood for something worth defending. Remember that when the panic deleting is done, when the scrambling subsides, when new dramas replace old ones in the digital cycle, remember that when it mattered, when it counted, when the lights were on and the cameras were rolling, someone looked at you and looked at them and chose you. Chose truth, chose to speak up despite whatever social cost might come from disagreeing with the mob. That's the real story. Not that you survived being attacked, that you were worth defending, that someone saw through the smoke and mirrors and coordinated campaigns to who you actually are and decided that person deserved to be publicly defended. Live up to that. Keep being that person. Keep being worth someone risking something to tell your truth. That's the only revenge that matters. That's the only response that lasts. Being so consistently, undeniably authentic that any lie told about you sounds like obvious fiction to anyone paying actual attention. Someone was paying attention. They stood up. They spoke out. They defended you on camera. Now, everyone who wasn't paying attention is suddenly paying attention, and your enemies are learning in real time what happens when the light they avoided for so long finally, inevitably, arrives. Let them learn, let them panic, let them delete. That's their story now. Yours is something better. Yours is about being defended, being vindicated, being worth someone's credibility and platform and courage. Now the question hanging in the digital air, echoing in group chats they thought were private, reverberating through DMs they thought were deleted. What else were they wrong about? That's the question, destroying them from the inside out right now. Because if they were this wrong about you, this certain and this wrong, what does that say about their judgment? Their character? Their ability to assess situations and people accurately? It says they're the liability, they're the risk, they're the ones whose word can't be trusted because they were so publicly, undeniably wrong when someone with receipts, with credibility, with a camera called them out. You don't have to say any of that. Someone already said it for you. On camera, where it counts, where algorithms amplify and audiences remember and permanent records keep permanent score. That's the new reality they're waking up to, panicking into, deleting their way through. And you? You're just here. Still standing, still building, still mattering enough that someone stood up for you when it would have been easier, safer, more convenient to stay silent. They chose truth over convenience. That says something about you. Something your enemies are finally, painfully, publicly being forced to acknowledge. You were worth defending. That's the statement. That's the verdict. That's the permanent record that no amount of panic deleting can erase. Now go be worth it again tomorrow, and the next day, and every day after that. Not for them, for you, for the next person who might need to see that truth defends itself, that authentic living creates its own vindication, that being consistently, honestly yourself is the only strategy that works when the lights come on and the cameras start rolling. Someone stood up for you. Honor that by standing firm in who you've always been. The rest handles itself. Tell me in the comments with complete honesty, have you ever panic deleted something because you realized you were wrong about someone? Have you ever been the one collecting receipts that you later regretted? Drop the full story below. And if you've ever been publicly defended when you didn't expect it, when did you realize the power of just being authentic instead of playing games? Write it out. No holding back.